band we're going to be talking about is Bush. To my surprise, I discovered recently that this band is from London. I've been listening to this band since basically they were around in the 90s. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but I'm definitely sure that they recorded an album back in 1994, and the album was called 16 Stone. 1994 is an era that splits what happened before, especially in the 4-5 years prior to that year, and what happened next. So, as you might be aware, I'm sure you are, if you're in this channel, you definitely are, but I'm just gonna remind you, 1994 is the year when Kurt Cobain died, took his own life. With him, the legacy of his music, of his followers, of all that kind of genre that kind of disappears with him is such a big loss. Kurt Cobain is the one who found, arguably, the word probably grunge. The Generation X, people who were born back in 1979, or people who were born a little bit earlier, all the way to 1979, for example, more or less. There were all those people who got to see Kurt Cobain and his band Nirvana. But I'm sure that many people are talking about Nirvana right now as I'm talking about this seminal album, which is 16 Stone by Bush. The genre here is, let's say, grunge. Obviously, the word grunge is a little bit diminishing, because as grunge is not a type of music, I've never labeled it as type of music, because there's lots of bands which are classified grunge, but the type of music between one and the other one is totally different. For example, Alice in Chains, which is definitely my favorite grunge, quote unquote, band, is totally different from Nirvana, because that Nirvana used to have a more punk approach, whereas Alice in Chains had, or still have, more hard rock sound from the 70s approach. So different, although the attitude used to be kind of similar, but the type of music was different. However, let's jump into 16 Stone. This album is like, it was basically an omen to what was going to happen, or what happened, because I'm sure they were recording this album back in 1993, and then when the album was released, basically shocked everybody about the sound of how, I wouldn't say American, but very similar to those sounds that people were used to back in the days. And to my surprise, I discovered that they're from London. In London, back in those days, there were different types of sounds. So bands like Radiohead, although they had a bit of grungy approach at the beginning, but then they were starting to experiment with different things in a great way, because I'm a fan of Radiohead, but this is totally different. So this is a proper rowdy, raw, pure American sound. I don't know how to describe it more than that. Those bands from Seattle and basically Bush with this album sum up everything, and you can hear what I'm talking about when you listen to it, especially if you're used to those kind of sounds. So Machine Head, for example, songs like Glycerine, which is such a great ballad, are things that you can never forget when you start to listen to them. This is my tribute to them, and what a great band. I remember back in the days, which was towards the late 90s, this band Bush used to be passed many times on those channels where they used to show video clips. And one of those was a thing, Chemical Between Us. I literally loved it. I can't remember what the title of the album is, but I literally loved it. I think it was around 97, 98, something like that. And that song was such a hit back in the days. I remember when the video was playing, the video clip was playing on TV, I used to be sitting there and just watch it because that kind of sound of the 90s is something very irreplaceable. It's got that kind of evocative feeling that not many bands nowadays can really reproduce. There is something, I can see lots of bands being inspired by that kind of sound, but if you are not in those days, it's really, really difficult. Those producers had something ahead, forward thinkers. Bands like Oasis, for example, you can hear that kind of mystical sounds when you hear albums like Not Be Here Now, which I'm not a fan of, but obviously What's the Story, Morning Glory, and the one from before, which I can't remember really the title. You can hear what I'm talking about. So that kind of sound, and I don't know if they were the studios, they were the types of instruments, or I'm sure the producer here has got a lot to say and they were kind of responsible for it. But if you kind of listen to them carefully, you will hear that there's something special about those kind of records. And 16 Stones is one of them. I'm not sure if it's revered and talked about like it is some of those essential albums. I'm not sure because I've not followed any critiques or critics. I don't know, to be fair, but I will put it in the first 10, for example, especially if you like to kind of move from one genre to another one and just be open-minded when it comes to art in general. So although they are obviously in the rock scene, but you guys are used to me talking about extreme metal bands because obviously that's my expertise, but being a fan also of other genres, not only included in the rock area or in the rock bubble, that's probably a better word. So I really wanted to share this with you, and I hope that you will go and find out what I'm talking about. 16 Stone by Bush, a band from London that in 1994, I can't remember if he was in the wake of the death of Kurt Cobain or before that, but anyway, they delivered this masterpiece, this hit album, and the songs are about 12, 13, and there's not even one track which doesn't sound good. I mean, they're all excellent, heavy at points, very deep, atmospheric sometimes in those kind of terms, in the grungy way, if we really have to put some label. And you know, there's a plethora of things to say about this incredible, evocative album that was produced here in the UK, where I'm based. And obviously I don't live far from London, and to my surprise, it's still mind-boggling how in that period here in the UK they were able to create that kind of grungy sound. Because sometimes it's like food, for example. If you go to a place where that food is from, obviously it's gonna taste better. It will have another texture, it will have another smell, it will have another different things. Although I can do it, for example, and I can venture into something that is not part of my culture, but I will definitely find some issues when it comes to ingredients, the measuring of stuff and everything. So here everything sounds exactly the same or even better of how things used to sound back in Seattle when they used to record those albums. Like Pearl Jam, for example, Vitalogy, or stuff like I don't know, something like Soundgarden as well. So that's that kind of vibe that you can hear and feel whenever you listen to this great record. I don't know if I'm coming across. I hope I am. If I'm not, guys, the only thing you need to do is just to go and look for it. I'm sure you'll find it everywhere. Spotify has got it, YouTube. Try and do your research, and then you will come back to me and say to me what you think about that. I'm 100% sure that you will love it and adore it, to the point that you will be listening to it probably for a month over and over again every day. Because when these things are discovered, especially if they are pieces of art that hardly replicable, and that's something that then sticks to you, and you will find hard to not listen to it and just play over and over again, either at the gym, when you're working out, at home while you're doing something else, or just sitting and enjoying a glass of wine or a pint of beer or whatever you like. So the 90s are for me a special era. So that decade for me meant everything, because that was the time when I was growing up, and I grew up in the 90s. So back in 1994 I was 10, and I remember when the death of Kurt Cobain was announced, and I still remember it to these days. I was living with my parents. It was like a rented house, a small little house, bless them and bless us. And all of a sudden, in that kind of old-fashioned TV, which wasn't black and white, but it was like almost black and white, if you know what I mean. So the news announced the death of this mysterious guy that to me wasn't familiar yet, because I knew I had heard about Nirvana, but that was the time when everybody started to then wear Nirvana t-shirts, and then I was kind of getting into that world more and more and more. And then as soon as I didn't buy it, but my grandma, bless her, she gave me a present, and the present was a Walkman. A couple of years after that, Kurt Cobain was dead, basically, passed away, or took his own life. So she gave me this present, and it was a Walkman. Do you remember that cassette that you would put in and then push the play button and then listen to your headphones? That was the time. So the first album I ever played in that recorder, or whatever it was, the Walkman, was Nirvana. I remember going to my cousin, asking my auntie if my cousin had a spare cassette, because I wanted to try it. I went to his stereo, remember, because I was allowed to, so I had the permission to go there. I opened it, and I just saw something very interesting, although they were all those kind of taped over cassettes. But I took it, I saw the name Nirvana, I was like, this is intriguing, let me see what everything is about. As soon as I put it in the Walkman, so my life completely changed. And then from there, obviously, I started to expand, and more and more and more, and my life became a stream of sounds, different sounds, and sometimes aggressive, sometimes more mellow, but they were all in that kind of direction of alternative stuff that back in the days used to be around, and to these days still around. So that era for me meant a lot. It's the era when I became a teenager, and when you're a teenager, all those emotions come together. There's lots of confusion going on, hormones take over, and then obviously you start to behave in a certain way, which is different from how you were used to behaving when you were younger. And I was talking today to a guy at the gym who was listening to a bit of heavy metal, because he came to the gym and he had his headphones, and then he took he plugged off his headphone. Oh no, he didn't plug it off. But anyway, all of a sudden, instead of hearing the music from afar, I just heard the music that he was listening to. And I was like, oh, you like heavy metal? He said, nah, I'm not a great fan of it, but I like when I work out to listen to something a little bit more. And I gave him a hint about my life and how I used to play in a band. And he said to me, yes, I like it. I said, yeah, I know you like it, and I also understand why you're not like a fanatic, because that kind of genre is like either you like it or you don't like it, or if you like it, you're not gonna like everything, especially when it comes to extreme sounds. It's definitely not for everyone, and I totally get it. I know I'm just I'm jumping from topic to topic, but that's the beauty of this channel. I like to kind of give you a broad idea, a broad understanding of how my life related to music has been, and it is to these days, especially growing up in an era when basically there wasn't such a ubiquitous way of perceiving the music. That time the music was rare, and if you were a fan of a niche genre, then you'd have to kind of find out more and more about that genre, and you had to spend money on magazines. You had to kind of know people who knew that guy who had that records. Therefore, if you were lucky enough, especially when you were young, we were for most of the time broke, you had kind of a hold of that kind of record who was lending it to you. And then from there, you used to kind of record it. If you had the occasion and the opportunity to have some money, you would definitely go and buy records. That was my case. So I used to buy records over and over again when I used to go to school, for example. I sometimes, for most of the time, I didn't eat. I would prefer save money towards the CD or the couple of CDs at the end of the month. That's the reason why I've got like a great discography, and those CDs I've got, they're all, it's like the holy grail for me, you know. And whenever I go back home, they're still back home by the way. I always look at them and still play the stereo I used to play records in, or records with. And I know, guys, you might say I'm a little bit nostalgic. Yeah, but who is not a little bit nostalgic of those days, you know, days when you were young and not much kind of responsibilities, and you know, you used to behave in a certain way. You used to hang around with friends. You used to explore things. You know, those things are, obviously I don't want to go back there, but it's nice to think about, and in retrospect, you know, how things were back in the days. But with that said, yes, guys, go and find out what I'm talking about. And 16 Stone is where we started from. I know I've digressed many times in this video in particular, because I just wanted to give you a broader idea of what was the period people were living in, and how music was perceived back in the days of nothing that was like now, of a completely different era and time. It seems like when I'm talking about these things, it seems like we were in the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages. So medieval time, because it's so different. So nowadays you just want to listen to something and then you just click whatever it is. You don't even have to tap, you just talk to your devices and they will just reply back with whatever music that you want, and that's incredible. So this is still science fiction for me. I can't really believe that we are in this era, which I love. But going back to what I was talking about earlier, it was a little bit better in that respect, because at least it was a little bit rare there was a bit of how can I say? Yes, there was a bit of peer pressure, because obviously if you're in that group, and I was one of those people who I liked when my friends were a little bit I wouldn't say manipulated by me, but I liked when they used to listen to what I recommended, if you know what I mean. So, and they used to kind of enjoy them. Then obviously I went further and further and further with the extreme stuff, and then many of them lagged behind, and few of them just kind of followed me, to the point that then we created bands, and the rest is history, quote unquote. Alright guys, if you like this video, obviously don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button below. Don't forget it, that's very important, because this is the way I can carry on doing and suggesting you music, point of view, sharing my life, guys, which has been quite of interesting. And the more you share this video is also something that's gonna support me grow my channel, and the more my channel grow, the more I get into deliver nice stuff, good content, plus my passion will grow even more, if you know what I mean. So support is very important. I will carry on doing videos anyway, but I know that you wanna me to post me these videos, therefore I also, guys, rely on your loyalty. Alright, have a lovely day, guys. I'm sure you enjoyed my conversation. If not, don't worry, you've got the comments down below that you can share with me and with whoever you know, so that I can know what can be more interesting for you, what can be not that interesting for me, but it doesn't matter. So as long as you are giving me those kind of feedbacks, which are very important. So apart from my channel, it's also me that I can grow professionally. Okay, bye bye, I'll see you soon.